May 1983, Las Vegas. A former accountant from Grand Rapids is sitting in the biggest poker tournament in the world, staring down the kind of names that used to define the game. He didn't pay the full $10,000 buy-in. He got here through a $1,000 satellite, and now, somehow, he's one hand away from winning the World Series of Poker main event. If he does, the prize is $540,000. More money than most people around poker could imagine. More importantly, it would make him the first player ever to win the main event after qualifying through a satellite. This wasn't supposed to happen, not in that era. In 1983, the main event drew a record 108 players, and the final table still felt like old world poker. Legends, road gamblers, larger-than-life characters, and above all, the shadow of Doyle Brunson. When the field narrowed, Brunson was the favourite. Then Rod Peat knocked him out three-handed, leaving two satellite qualifiers, Pete and Tom McEvoy, to play for the World Championship. One of them was about to do something nobody had ever done before. And it took forever. The heads-up match dragged on for 7.5 hours, the longest in WSOP history at the time. Pete had started with the chip lead and at one point had McEvoy nearly buried. Early in the duel, Pete shoved, with top pair and a straight flush draw. McEvoy could have called with two lower pairs, he folded. He wasn't interested in flipping for $540,000. He was playing the long game. Hand by hand, hour by hour, he clawed his way back until sometime around 2 a.m. the last hand finally arrived. McEvoy looked down at pocket queens. Pete had king-jack. The chips went in, the flop came 6-6-3. The turn was a jack, giving Pete hope. The river paired the board with another 3, and just like that, it was over. Tom McEvoy had won the 1983 World Series of Poker main event, and then all the pressure of the last few days, maybe even the last few years, came out at once. He jumped up to his chair, yelled, and celebrated emotionally. His wife was right there beside him. A man who, not long before this, had lost his job, gone broke, and taken a shot on poker, had just become world champion. It looked like an upset. It looked like a fairy tale. What nobody fully understood yet was that this win was more than that. It was a preview of a poker story the world would only recognize decades later. Tom McEvoy was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and poker found him early, really early. When he was 5 years old, his grandmother would sit him on her knee, give him $1 in coins, teach him how to play, and then spend the next few hours winning it all back. It was a brutal little education. Get better, or keep losing to grandma, so he and his brothers got better. Before long, the McEvoy boys were running games of their own and taking money off neighborhood kids, to the point that their mother sometimes got angry phone calls from other parents complaining about what was going on at the house. For a while though, poker stayed in the background. McEvoy graduated from college, became an accountant, and tried to live the kind of life that made sense on paper. Steady job, normal routine, predictable future. But poker never really left. He was still playing about once a week, and eventually those games got bigger, longer, and harder to control. The home games at his house would sometimes start on Friday night and keep going until Sunday afternoon. He later admitted that he often won more money in those little $5 limit games than he made in a week at work, and that showing up on Monday not exactly fresh probably helped bring his accounting career to an end. Before he lost that job, McEvoy had already taken a trip to Las Vegas and won about $1,000 playing poker. That mattered because his annual salary at the time was only around $18,000. It made him think there might actually be something here. Then he got fired in 1978, took off for another Vegas trip and won again. At that point the idea stopped sounding crazy, or at least crazy enough to try. He spent the next year flying back and forth from Grand Rapids to Las Vegas before finally deciding to take his shot and chase poker full time. He later said the hard part wasn't the cards, it was convincing his wife, their 3 young children, his parents, and everyone else around him that he hadn't completely lost his mind. That's the part that makes 1983 hit harder. By the time McEvoy sat down in the World Series of Poker main event, he wasn't some overnight sensation. He was a guy who had bet his career, his stability, and his reputation on a game most people still didn't take seriously. He had already gone broke. He had already made the uncomfortable choice to walk away from the safe life. And now, after all of that, one satellite tournament had put him into the biggest event in poker. What came next would decide whether that gamble had been reckless or brilliant. The seed is real. Just days after winning a $1,000 satellite, Tom McEvoy walks into Binion's Horseshoe for the 1983 World Series of Poker main event. This is not some local card room, this is the game, the biggest tournament in poker, 108 players, the largest main event field the WSOP had ever seen. And first place is $540,000, more money than most of the people in that room had ever seen in one place. Las Vegas is built for moments like this. Glitter Gulch, neon everywhere, side games running around the clock, $1 million display sitting in the casino like a monument to greed, and moving through all of it are the names that made poker feel larger than life. Doyle Brunson, Amarillo Slim, Stu Ungar, Sailor Roberts, the Old Guard, the men who made this place their world long before Tom McEvoy ever had a reason to believe he belonged in it. And then there's McEvoy, a former accountant from Michigan. No legend, no aura, no long record in the biggest games. He didn't even buy in the way most champions did. He got here cheap through a satellite, the kind of route that usually ends with a quick exit and a good story back home. On paper, he's exactly the kind of player this tournament is supposed to crush. But poker doesn't care about paper. The cards are the same, the chips are the same, and once he sits down, the only thing that matters is whether he can stay there. So that becomes the plan, not to dominate, not to announce himself, just stay alive. Let the loud players be loud. Let the famous names fight for control. Let the room feel bigger than him if it wants to. Because in a tournament this deep, this expensive and this unforgiving, trying to win too early is how you disappear. And Tom McEvoy did not come all this way just to disappear. The tournament starts fast. 12 tables, chips moving everywhere, big names, big pots, constant action. This is not a slow grind yet, this is chaos. Players pushing edges, testing each other early, trying to build something before the blinds catch up to them, and almost immediately you can see it happening. People are going home. The defending champion, Jack Treetop Strauss, is already under pressure. 1 year removed from one of the most unbelievable wins in poker history. And now he's out, just like that. $10,000 gone, title gone. That's the nature of this tournament, no rebuy, no second chance. You're in, until you're not. Around him, the room keeps moving. Amarillo Slim is talking as always. Gabe Kaplan is splashing around in pots. Women like Barbara Enright and Betty Carey are pushing into what used to be a closed world. The old guard is still there, but the game is changing. New players, new styles, and nobody is safe. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, Tom McEvoy is still there. No big pots, no highlight hands, no attention. Just folding, watching, picking his spots carefully, letting the table come to him instead of forcing anything himself. It's not exciting, it's not flashy, but it works, because while the names get knocked out, he doesn't. And in a tournament like this, that's all that matters. The tournament slows down, not in pace but in noise. Fewer tables, fewer players. The chaos from the early stages starts to disappear, and what's left are the ones still standing. The bets are bigger now. Every hand means more. As one of the commentators puts it, each hand becomes more decisive. And this is where the tournament usually separates people. Because early on, you can survive. Here, you have to play. Around the room, the names are still there. But the dynamic is changing. Players like Jay Heimowitz are building stacks. Others are quietly accumulating chips. The amateurs are no longer just part of the field, they're competing. Even the pros are starting to say it, the gap is closing. The new players are just as good. They just don't have the names yet. And somewhere in that shift, Tom McEvoy fits perfectly. He's not forcing anything, not trying to outplay everyone in one moment, just staying consistent. Hand after hand, decision after decision. The kind of poker that doesn't stand out, but keeps you moving forward. And slowly, the position changes. He's no longer just another player still alive. He's one of the players left. And at this stage, that's everything. Because now people start to notice. Not because of one big hand, but because he's still there, when a lot of others aren't. Now, the pressure is real. The field has been cut down, and it's happening fast. Players are dropping out one after another. $10,000 gone in a single hand. No second chances, no rebuys. As they say at the table, you're frozen out. And the closer it gets, the faster it moves. The bets are bigger now. The pots are heavier. What used to be a few thousand is now tens of thousands. Every decision carries weight, and every mistake costs everything. You can feel it in the room, the energy changes, less talking, more focus. Players leaning in, watching every move. Because now it's not just about staying in, it's about what's waiting at the end. $540,000, the title, a place among the champions. As one player puts it, the money matters, but the title matters more. This is the one everyone wants, the one that stays with you long after the chips are gone. And for Tom McEvoy, that pressure hits differently, because he didn't come here as one of the legends. He didn't come here with a reputation to protect. Just a decision he made years earlier, to walk away from a stable life and take a shot on poker. And now that decision is sitting right in front of him. Every hand is tied to it, every chip is part of it. Around him, players start tightening up, thinking more, hesitating, trying not to be the one who makes the mistake. But McEvoy doesn't change. Same rhythm, same patience, letting the game come to him. And as the field keeps shrinking, something becomes clear. He's not just deep in the tournament anymore. He's getting close to the final table, close to something that could change everything. The final table, now it's real. 3 players left in the 1983 World Series of Poker main event. At one end, Doyle Brunson, the favorite, the legend, the man everyone expected to still be standing here. And across from him, 2 names most of the room didn't expect to see this deep: Rod Peat and Tom McEvoy. The dynamic is obvious. Brunson is pushing the action, betting, raising, applying pressure in almost every pot. That's his style. Aggressive, relentless, the kind of player who forces mistakes. Peat is right there with him, playing back, not backing down. And McEvoy, he's sitting back, watching, waiting. The chips in front of him are solid, enough to play, enough to stay in. But he's not getting involved in every hand. While Brunson and Peat go at each other, pot after pot, McEvoy lets it happen. He doesn't need to force anything here. And then the moment comes. Brunson moves all in. Around $250,000, a massive pot. He's drawing to a flush. A strong hand, strong enough to put everything on the line. Petey calls, showdown. Petey has trip nines. Brunson misses. And just like that, the legend is out. Doyle Brunson, eliminated in 3rd place, the favourite is gone. The script is broken, because now the World Series of Poker main event comes down to 2 players who weren't supposed to be here. 2 unknowns, 2 satellite qualifiers, and one of them is about to become the world champion. Heads up. After 4 days, 108 players, and it comes down to 2. Rod Peat on one side of the table, and Tom McEvoy on the other. One of them is about to win $540,000 and become world champion. The other walks away with $216,000. Still life-changing money, but not the title. And at this point, the title is everything. They've been playing for hours, long enough that every decision feels heavier than the last. The room is quieter now, no distractions, just chips, cards, and pressure. As the commentators say, you have to stay mentally sharp. You can't make a mistake here. And early on, it's not going McEvoy's way. Peter has the lead, bigger stack, more control. There's a hand where McEvoy bets $60,000. Peat raises it to $120,000 more. A massive pot, the kind of hand that can swing everything. And Peter takes it. Just like that, they're nearly even again. This isn't a quick finish. Chips are moving back and forth, big decisions. No one giving anything away. Until one hand changes everything. The flop comes 6, 3, 4. Peat fires, 80,000. McEvoy doesn't hesitate, he goes all in. Every chip across the line. Now it's on Peat. Peat goes into tank. This is it. The moment every player fears, call and risk everything, fold and give it up. The clock is called. A minute? Then 10 seconds more, the entire tournament sitting in one decision. McEvoy doesn't move, no reaction or tells, the clock runs out, Peat folds. And just like that, the entire tournament shifts. McEvoy now has control. A commanding stack, the momentum, the pressure on his side. And from here, it moves fast. A few hands later, the chips are in again. This time, there's no decision. Both players all in. Final hand, McEvoy turns over pocket queens. Peat shows king jack of diamonds. The flop comes down, 6, 6, 3. No help for Peat. McEvoy is ahead. Turn. A jack. Now Peat has a pair, but only one card left. One moment that decides everything. River. Another 3. No king or jack. No miracle. It's over. Tom McEvoy wins the 1983 World Series of Poker main event. $540,000. 4 days, one long grind. And then it all hits at once. He jumps up. Emotion pouring out. His wife right there beside him. Relief. Shock. Everything that built up through the entire tournament. Gone in a single moment. I did it. I did it. A former accountant, a satellite qualifier, a player nobody expected to be here. And just like that, it's over. A former accountant from Michigan has just won the 1983 World Series of Poker Main Event, $540,000, the biggest title in poker. A name now sitting next to legends who had built this game from the ground up. And at the time, it feels like a surprise, a great run. An outsider getting hot at the right moment. Something unusual, but not something that changes everything. But look closer, because this wasn't just a win. This was the first time anyone had ever done it this way. Tom McEvoy didn't buy in like the others. He didn't come in as a known professional. He didn't have a reputation built over years in the biggest games. He came through a satellite, a cheap path into a $10,000 tournament, and somehow turned it into a world championship. That wasn't supposed to happen. Not in 1983. Back then, this was still the old world of poker. The Texans, the road gamblers, the same names year after year controlling the biggest stage. Experience mattered, reputation mattered, and most of all, belonging mattered. McEvoy had none of that, and he still won. At the same time, something else was happening. The field had grown, 108 players, the biggest yet, more amateurs, more unknowns, players coming from outside the traditional poker circles. The gap was closing. The old guard was still there, but they weren't untouchable anymore. And this result made that impossible to ignore, because from this point on, poker wasn't just theirs. The World Series of Poker was starting to belong to everyone. And yet, nobody fully realized what they had just seen. No cameras turning it into a global moment, no ESPN coverage, no online poker sites sending thousands of players into satellites, no poker boom waiting around the corner, so the story passed quietly. An accountant enters cheap, beats the best, wins it all. 20 years later, the same story would happen again, only this time the world would be watching. And they would call it the beginning of something new, but it wasn't new. It had already happened in 1983. And the story doesn't end there, because for Tom McEvoy, that win wasn't the peak. It was the start. He didn't disappear after 1983. He didn't fade into a one-time champion story. He stayed in the game and kept winning. Over the years, he collected 4 World Series of Poker bracelets across 4 different games. Limit Hold'em, No Limit Hold'em, Raz, Limit Omaha. Not just one format, not just one run, a complete player. And it wasn't just titles. He kept showing up, deep runs, cashes, millions in tournament winnings. Year after year, still part of the conversation. Still relevant in a game that constantly changes. But his impact goes beyond results. Because McEvoy didn't just play poker, he helped teach it. He became one of the early voices of modern poker strategy, writing books, breaking the game down, explaining concepts that at the time most players kept to themselves. His books became required reading for serious players. He wrote for Card Player. He wasn't just competing, he was shaping how people understood the game. And then there's the part almost nobody talks about, the environment. Back then, poker rooms were filled with smoke. Hours and hours at the table, no breaks, no fresh air. Players used to call it the horseshoe crud. It was just part of the game. McEvoy didn't accept that. In 1988, he helped organize one of the first non-smoking poker tournaments, not because it was popular, but because he believed it should change. And years later, in 2002, he pushed it even further. He made a deal. He would teach Benny Binion's son how to play poker, in exchange for making the WSOP smoke-free. And it worked. The World Series of Poker changed. That's the kind of impact you don't see on a results page. He also pushed for things like flatter payouts and shorter tournament days, ideas that would make poker more sustainable, more accessible, and better for the long term. Not just for professionals, but for everyone entering the game. And the game kept evolving. Online poker came. A new generation of players arrived. And McEvoy was still there, adapting, representing, staying part of the world he helped build. Eventually, in 2013, he was inducted into the Poker Hall of Fame. And that feels right, because his legacy isn't just one win, it's what he did after it, how he stayed, how he contributed, how he helped shape the game into what it would become. It starts small. A kid sitting on his grandmother's knee, learning poker with a few coins, winning some, losing most of them back, not thinking about world championships, not thinking about Las Vegas, just a game. Then years later, the normal life, college, a job, accounting, The kind of path that makes sense on paper, stable, predictable, safe, and then it breaks. He loses the job, goes broke, starts over, makes a decision that doesn't make sense to the people around him, walks away from certainty and chooses poker. And somehow that decision leads here, a $1,000 satellite, a seat in the biggest tournament in the world, and 4 days later, a world championship. At the time, it looked like an incredible run, an underdog story, a hot streak, one of those moments where everything just happens to come together at the right time. But looking back, it feels different, because the structure is all there. Cheap entry, unknown player, no reputation, wins the main event. The exact same story that would explode 20 years later. The only difference? No cameras, no global audience, no online poker sending thousands of players into satellites, no ESPN turning it into a phenomenon. So it passed quietly. An accountant wins the World Series of Poker, and the world moves on until years later, when the same story happens again. Only this time everyone is watching, and they give it a name. They call it the beginning of the poker boom. But if you look closely, it didn't begin there. It began here. So the question is simple. Was Tom McEvoy the real moneymaker before Chris Moneymaker?